that you're a certified diver, what do you love best about diving? Discovering fascinating underwater life? Exploring reefs with your friends? Taking underwater pictures? Finding and recovering something that someone lost? Is it the challenge of doing something fun and new? Maybe it's all of these. Maybe none. Maybe you don't really know what it is you love best about diving. Yet. The Padi Adventures in Diving program shows you how to get more out of diving. It expands your present abilities, and it leads you in new directions, opening new underwater interests and new diving opportunities. And if you're thinking about long classroom sessions, forget it. In this program, you learn about diving by diving. Adventures in Diving emphasizes real-world, practical skill development through hands-on practice and open water experiences. In most instances, you develop your knowledge through study on your own at your convenience and through pre-dive briefings with your instructor. And Adventures in Diving emphasizes you and your interests. It's not a single curriculum, but a variable one that lets you choose the activities that you want to experience. You and your instructor can structure the program dozens of ways, adapting to the local dive environment, your interests, and your schedule. You can participate in just one adventure dive or two that interest you, or earn the Padi Adventure Diver Certification, or complete the Padi Advanced Open Water Diver Certification. You earn the Adventure Diver Certification by simply completing any 3 adventure dives. For the Advanced Open Water Diver Certification, you complete the underwater navigation and deep adventure dives and any 3 other adventure dives you and your instructor choose together. You can go directly from Open Water Diver to Advanced Open Water Diver, and if you've already earned the Adventure Diver Certification, those adventure dives count with your instructor's approval. Earning the Advanced Open Water Diver Certification qualifies you to enter the Padi Rescue Diver course, which expands your knowledge of dive accident prevention and management. No matter whether you're interested in just trying a few adventure dives, completing the Adventure Diver Certification, or going all the way through Advanced Open Water Diver, you have a lot of adventure dives to choose from. They include an altitude dive, boat dive, deep dive, diver propulsion vehicle dive, drift dive, dry suit dive, fish identification dive, multi-level dive, night dive, peak performance buoyancy dive, search and recovery dive, underwater naturalist dive, underwater navigation dive, underwater photography dive, underwater videography dive, and a wreck dive. Each dive in the Adventures in Diving program is actually the first dive from the corresponding specialty diver course. So if you and your instructor choose to, each adventure dive you make can be credited toward completing the entire specialty diver course. And if you've already completed any Padi specialty diver courses, the first dive of most of them can count toward your adventure diver or advanced open water diver certification at your instructor's discretion. Thanks to this unique course integration, depending upon your instructor's training schedule, you may find it possible to progress toward a certification in the Adventures in Diving program and one or more specialty diver certifications at the same time. This is a great way to broaden your underwater experiences and abilities and have a lot of fun in the process. Because Adventures in Diving emphasizes open water dives as much as possible, you'll prepare for those dives primarily through independent study, by interacting with your instructor, and through pre-dive briefings. You'll handle much of your knowledge development with the Adventures in Diving manual and video, or the Adventures in Diving multimedia. First, you read the short introduction. Then, ideally, before each dive, you read the section relating to that dive. Each section's pretty short, so if you decide on short notice to join in on an adventure dive, this won't hold you up. Adventures in Diving is always expanding, so there may be adventure dives not covered in the manual or multimedia. Ask your instructor, dive center, or resort. You'll cover the material for these dives through a session or two with your instructor or with a diver education video. In any case, you fill out the brief knowledge review for each dive to hand in to your instructor. If it's been a while since your last dive, you might want a more complete refresher. The Scuba Review program, featuring the Scuba Tune-Up Multimedia, is a fun and convenient way to brush up. This interactive program includes a skill review with live-action video from the Padi Open Water Diver video. Or if you prefer, use the Scuba Tune-Up Guidebook. Your instructor, or one of her assistant instructors or dive masters, can help you put the polish back on your underwater skills, usually in a short session in a pool or confined water. Don't hesitate to ask for their help, even if you just want to brush up on using the RDP. You can use other PADI diver materials to help you get more out of the program. For example, the PADI Night Diving, Deep Diving, Wreck Diving, and Underwater Navigation videos expand on the skills and knowledge you develop during those adventure dives, plus other skills you will master by completing the entire specialty program. Each of these videos also has a corresponding manual, so that the manual, video, and Adventures in Diving all integrate with the particular specialty diver program. With this close integration between Adventures in Diving and specialty diver programs and materials, you can progress easily from one diving activity to the next, based upon your needs and interests, building upon what you've already mastered without having to repeat things unnecessarily. Now, let's take a look at adventure dives you can choose from. Your instructor will guide you as you pick the best dives that interest you and the best sequence. You can choose to develop the skills that relate to specific dive environments, broader dive skills that expand the dive environments you enjoy, and skills that relate to activities you can enjoy in virtually all environments. Sometimes your instructor might not be able to offer a particular adventure dive due to logistics. For instance, in some places, virtually all the diving is accessible from shore, so there's no need for a dive boat. The boat adventure dive might not be an option. Many dive centers offer adventure dives, both locally and as part of their travel programs, so you can choose from as many as possible, as well as to accommodate different schedules. But no matter where you are, you'll probably be able to make most of the adventure dives. Choose based on your needs, as well as on your interests. You can dive almost anywhere you find water, and that includes some of the world's most beautiful mountain lakes. But because lower atmospheric pressure at altitude affects dive table use, diving 300 meters, 1,000 feet above sea level requires procedures you don't need diving in the ocean. The Altitude Adventure Dive introduces you to these, giving you access to diving opportunities at higher elevations. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to realize that boating and diving go hand in hand. But even if you're an experienced boater, if you've not had much experience diving from boats, there are a few things that make it more fun. The Boat Adventure Dive familiarizes you with diving from boats, whether a small runabout or a large cruiser. This dive especially benefits you if most or all of your dives to date have been shore dives. Look down an ocean wall or into the mesmerizing emerald depths of a lake, and most divers say to themselves, "Let's see what's down there." The Deep Adventure Dive opens the door to exploring below 18 meters, 60 feet. You'll experience the thrill and challenge of deep recreational diving, while learning the procedures you need to follow to manage the risks and enjoy the adventure. For the joy of three-dimensional aircraft handling, the thrill of motorcycling, and the convenience of underwater speed, you can't beat a Diver Propulsion Vehicle, or DPV for short. In the DPV Adventure Dive, you'll learn to get optimum use from DPVs, a few safety guidelines, and have a lot of fun driving and zooming through the underwater world. It's a real kick. As you may know already, it's not fun to spend your dive fighting the current. So in areas with strong, nearly continuous currents, and in some rivers, the divers say, if you can't beat it, join it. In the Drift Adventure Dive, you'll enjoy diving with the current, floating effortlessly, watching the scenery flow by. This dive shows you the techniques that keep you and your buddy together, and assures that when you surface, the dive boat's nearby to pick you up. Cooler water sites have some of the best diving, which is why many divers choose the extra warmth you get from a dry suit. However, you don't dive in a dry suit like you do in other exposure suits, because dry suits are full of air. And that's where the Dry Suit Adventure Dive comes in. This dive teaches you the differences, so you can dive with more comfort further into cooler seasons and in cooler climates. Divers are among the underwater world's most important ambassadors who call attention to the need to protect and preserve. In the Aware Fish Identification Adventure Dive, you take the first step toward turning your dives into valuable data collecting missions for world science. You learn to identify fish, how to count them, and you're introduced to how you can participate in the ongoing global documentation of our underwater resources. As you learned in your open water diver course, with tables, you base your time limit on the maximum depth of the dive. And until recently, that was all the time you had. But today, dive computers and the wheel version of the recreational dive planner extend your dive time when you ascend to shallower depths on a multi-level profile. The Multi-Level Adventure Dive introduces you to getting maximum benefit from dive computers. You learn why multi-level diving works and 8 rules for safe diving with a computer. You'll also learn to use the wheel if you don't know how already, which makes a great backup if your computer malfunctions on holiday. Diving after dark might sound a bit scary, but the truth is it's fascinating, fun, and fantastic. Your dive light reveals a new world of different creatures and post-sunset adventures when you night dive. It only takes the few techniques you learn during the Night Adventure Dive and a bit of experience to make night the most exciting part of a day's diving. The easiest way to tell an inexperienced diver from an accomplished diver is by watching their buoyancy control. Both have control, but the diver who's mastered buoyancy glides weightless over the reef, maintaining control effortlessly and unconsciously. The Peak Performance Buoyancy Adventure Dive brings your buoyancy control skills up to this level, so you spend more time enjoying the dive and less time adjusting your buoyancy. And Peak Performance Buoyancy makes it easier to stay out of contact with sensitive aquatic life, helps you control ascents effortlessly, and reduces your air consumption for longer dives. Many dive centers and instructors feature the Peak Performance Buoyancy along with Project Aware, Aquatic World Awareness, Responsibility, and Education programs. This is a great dive for improving your underwater skills and a good choice as one of the first adventure dives to make. Sooner or later, you or someone you know will lose something underwater. The Search and Recovery Adventure Dive introduces you to the skills of searching for and lifting to the surface small to medium-sized objects that can be recovered by recreational divers. It's more than a little satisfying to successfully find and retrieve something lost underwater. If you're like most divers, the unique life you find underwater is a primary reason you dive. The Underwater Naturalist Adventure Dive focuses on aquatic life, whether you're visiting a mountain lake, an inland river, or a coral reef. You'll learn about how to interact with nature underwater and the not-so-obvious differences between land and underwater ecosystems. And you'll sharpen your observation skills by seeking for and identifying different types of underwater organisms. Want to save air, time, and get the most out of every dive? That's why you complete the Underwater Navigation Adventure Dive. By learning how to track where you are, where you were, and where you're going, you dive efficiently and minimize stress. During this adventure dive, you'll learn to navigate using natural clues in the environment and how to use your dive compass to find your way even on a featureless bottom in low visibility. Every diver benefits from mastering basic underwater navigation, and this adventure dive gets you headed in the right direction, if you'll excuse the pun. The Underwater Photography Adventure Dive lets you exercise your creative side while diving. Whether you enjoy snap shooting or more serious photography, this dive introduces you to the principles and techniques for successful underwater picture taking. Underwater photography shares diving with non-divers and lets you bring back memories of your underwater adventures without taking something out of the environment. You can go through the underwater photography section in two ways. On the Photo Fast Track if you're not familiar with underwater picture taking and if you're mainly interested in snapshots and good results. Or if you want to know more about picture taking principles and photo basics, you can cover that too in this adventure dive. The choice is yours. Similarly, if you enjoy making videos, the Underwater Videography Adventure Dive develops your underwater shooting skills. You'll learn how to select and use an underwater video system, how to care for it, and basic underwater shooting techniques. And if you don't own a camera and want to choose the underwater photography or videography dive, don't worry. Many PADI dive centers and resorts have cameras you can use. Of all the specialty activities available, most divers cite wreck diving as one of their top interests. And it's no wonder, because wrecks hold the mystery and excitement of exploration. They're artificial reefs that attract diverse underwater creatures. And wrecks bond us with our past, forming a tangible link to history. The Wreck Adventure Dive introduces you to basic wreck diving procedures, planning, and points of interest. Most dive locations have wrecks, not just shipwrecks, but cars, airplanes, trains, and other man-made objects, meaning you can usually choose this popular adventure dive virtually anywhere. And since adventures in diving is constantly expanding, there'll be more adventure dives to choose from as time goes by. You can participate in adventure dives even after you earn your adventure diver or advanced open water diver certification. So they're great introductions to new activities now or in the future. Among all the adventure dives, 3 of the most popular are the underwater navigation, night, and deep dives. These dives establish skills that apply to many diving situations, so you'll probably choose to make one or more of these, or all of them. So let's look at these more closely. Underwater navigation is the foundation for efficiently finding your way throughout a dive and easily finding your way back to your exit. Night diving expands your navigation skills, and it develops your ability to apply dive skills when darkness restricts your vision. Deep diving extends your depth range, taking you to 18 meters, 60 feet, or deeper. This helps ready you for some of the spectacular deeper diving available in some areas. Let's look at the skills you'll practice during your dives, beginning with a look at some of the specialty equipment you'll be using. You're already familiar with basic compass use from your open water diver course, and you'll expand upon what you know during the underwater navigation and night dives. Your instructor or dive store can help you choose an appropriate compass. Generally, an underwater compass is liquid-filled, which makes it pressure-resistant and helps dampen needle movement so it's easy to read. The needle should turn freely, even if the compass isn't perfectly level. It should have an adjustable bezel with index marks and numerical degree markings, so you can set and record bearings. Glow-in-the-dark or lit markings help you read the compass in low light or at night. And the marked lubber line makes it easier to properly align the compass with your body as you swim. Diving compasses vary in their features, and you may also choose from either a direct or indirect reading compass. With a direct reading compass, when you turn the bezel and index marks, the numbers move. With an indirect reading compass, the numbers do not move when you turn the bezel and index marks. Either way, setting the compass for the same number gives you the same heading. A compass board helps increase your accuracy with a compass, and the nav finder lets you track your location, even after making several direction changes on an irregular course. Besides the navigation dive, you'll use your compass during the night adventure dive, along with some other night diving equipment. In addition to the compass, for night diving you'll also want to have complete instrumentation, including a depth gauge and timer or a computer. And it's a good idea to carry a whistle, so you can make yourself heard at the surface in the dark. A slate allows reliable communication with your buddy. A reference line from a boat or buoy makes night descents and ascents easier. And because it's easier to accidentally bump into things in the dark, even in warm water you may want to wear an exposure suit and gloves and booties to reduce the possibility of accidental cuts and scrapes. It's best to use equipment you're familiar and comfortable with when night diving. If you've got a new regulator, BCD, or some other new equipment, consider making a few day dives before diving with it at night. It practically goes without saying that for night diving, you need a dive light. In fact, you really want at least two, a primary and a backup, because even the best dive lights can fail, making it hard to find your buddy, read your gauges, or follow an ascent line. One or more backup lights minimizes the possibility of having to finish a night dive without a working light. There are a lot of dive lights to choose from. Look for these 6 features. First, look for a rugged outer case that stands up to a bit of abuse and salt water. Second, look for dependable switches, with a switch lock desirable to keep the light from turning on accidentally in your dive bag. Third, try to choose a light with as few O-ring sealed openings as possible to make maintenance easier. And fourth, be sure the light feels comfortable to you. Fifth, a wrist lanyard helps avoid loss. And sixth, be sure it has fresh batteries or freshly charged rechargeable batteries. Some divers prefer rechargeable batteries because they're cheaper to operate if you use the light a lot. Other divers prefer disposable battery lights because they don't cost as much initially. Remember that some of the brightest dive lights generate so much heat that they should only be turned on underwater. Turning them on above water may damage them. Follow the manufacturer's recommendations. You'll find some other lights useful. Use chemical or marker lights to mark buoys, lines, and you and your buddy. In clear water, suspend a submersible strobe beacon to help you navigate and find your way back to your dive float or boat. Be sure to rinse dive lights thoroughly with fresh water after diving, and to clean and lubricate the O-rings regularly. If you accidentally flood a dive light, drain the light as soon as possible. Throw away disposable batteries. Remove the O-rings and rinse the light inside and out with fresh water. Then drain the light and allow it to dry. Return the light to your dive store or the manufacturer for service before diving with it again. Since water absorbs color and light, you may want to take a dive light along on the deep adventure dive. Deep diving has other equipment considerations too. The scuba equipment you already use is probably fine for deep diving, but you want to ensure that it's in top shape. As you go deeper, the air you breathe becomes denser, so make sure your regulator's in top condition, has been maintained properly, and has been professionally serviced in the last year. Your submersible pressure gauge should be serviced and checked for accuracy, along with your regulator. As you remember from your open water diver course, the deeper you go, the faster you use your air. So on a deep dive, select an adequately large cylinder, which may be larger than what you may prefer on a shallower dive. Even with this much air, you'll want to keep a close eye on your submersible pressure gauge. Make sure your BCD and the low-pressure inflator are in good working condition, and as for all diving, that your alternate air source is clearly marked and secured in the triangle formed by your chin and the lower corners of your rib cage. It may be warm at shallow depths, but choose your exposure suit considering the temperature at depth. Deep dives may take you below a thermocline into significantly cooler water that requires more thermal protection. In some cases, you may want a self-contained ascent bottle or a pony bottle as an additional air source. And of course, you'll want a complete set of gauges or a dive computer. When deep diving with a computer, remember to stay within its no decompression limits and check your exposure with the RDP. You and your buddy should each have your own computer and end the dive based on the most conservative readings of either. If your computer fails, follow the manufacturer instructions. If you don't have them, make a normal ascent at 18 meters, 60 feet per minute, or the computer's rate if slower, and make a safety stop at 5 meters, 15 feet, perhaps as long as your air supply permits if you're close to a no-stop limit. Consult the manufacturer guidelines before diving again. You may have to wait 12 hours or more. Besides your regular equipment, some specialized equipment helps on a deep dive. For one, a reference line makes it easier to control ascents and descents. This can be an anchor or mooring line or a weighted shot line. An extra tank and regulator at 5 meters, 15 feet provides air for a safety stop or emergency decompression stop if you or your buddy accidentally exceed your planned limits. And since you're more buoyant at the end of the dive, it helps to weight yourself so you're neutrally buoyant with a nearly empty tank. Even so, some easily accessible extra weights at the safety stop may help if you're a bit lighter than you planned. If you're not diving from a boat, you can use a surface support station for your reference line, emergency tank, and extra weights. It's a good idea to have emergency oxygen and first aid available for any diving activity, but they can be especially important for rendering aid when deep diving and in remote areas. Oxygen, as you recall from your open water diver course, is used for first aid for suspected decompression illness. Now, let's look at the navigation techniques you'll be using on your adventure dives. Proficient navigation reduces stress and unnecessary surface swims, makes dive planning more effective, helps you and your buddy stay together, and reduces your air consumption. What you learn can even help you navigate on land when hiking or camping. Since underwater navigation plays an important role on most dives, you might choose to make the Underwater Navigation Adventure Dive as one of your first dives. To navigate effectively underwater, you need to know two things in relation to your entry point and planned exit point: your travel direction and how far you've traveled. You can estimate distances with kick cycles, elapsed time, tank pressure, arm spans, and measured line or tape. A kick cycle is the distance you travel after completing one fin stroke with each leg. Swim at a normal pace and count each time either foot returns to the same place in the fin stroke. Your instructor will have you count kick cycles while swimming a known distance, which will tell you how much distance you cover in one cycle. You can also measure distance by timing yourself swimming at a steady pace. You don't have to count, but if you stop or pause, it throws off your measurements. Your instructor will also have you time yourself swimming a known distance so you can find out how far you travel per second. Especially when following a pattern like a square, you can measure distance based on your air consumption. To be accurate, your breathing rate and depth can't change much, however. Arm spans and measured line or tape are slow, but provide the most accuracy. Nature provides clues that help you navigate. This is called natural navigation and begins before you dive. Note the direction of waves, currents, or tide. Note the sun angle and see which way it casts shadows, and look for objects and formations. Check the bottom finder or charts if available to get a feel for the underwater topography. All of these can help you find your way. To reduce vertigo and stay oriented, descend facing the way you want to go, feet first, or at least with your head higher than your feet. When descending at night, use the same technique and be sure to turn your lights on first. If possible, descend along a reference line to help control your descent rate and minimize vertigo. During the deep adventure dive, use the same technique to stay oriented during a long descent. The reference line makes it easier to slow or stop your descent if you need to. Once on the bottom, use natural references to help keep your bearings. Look at shadows and the sun angle, and feel which way the current's pushing you. Both of these provide reliable direction indications. Follow the bottom contour and look for distinctive bottom composition or landmarks such as coral, rock, and reef formations, which may change from one area to the next. For example, in the ocean, spur and groove coral reefs always lie perpendicular to shore. And in seas and lakes, sand ripples run parallel to shore. Aquatic life often lives in specific niches, giving you an idea of direction or where you are. For example, sea fans grow perpendicular to the prevailing current and will face the same direction. And listen for the intensity of sounds that can tell you you're close to a known location. When natural navigation isn't enough, you navigate most reliably by using your compass. Compass navigation relies on holding the compass properly. As you recall from your open water diver course, you need to hold the compass as level as possible, with the lubber line aligned with your body center line. Look over the compass so you can see where you're going, and keep the needle between the compass index marks as you swim. To set a heading on your compass, point the lubber line in your intended travel direction. Next, turn the bezel until the index marks are set over the compass needle. Swim along the lubber line, keeping the needle between the index marks. A reciprocal course takes you back on a reverse heading. Rotate the bezel so the index marks are 180 degrees from the original heading. Now turn so the compass needle rests within the marks, which should put you facing where you came from. You can use your compass and distance estimation to follow a square, rectangle, or triangle pattern. For a square or rectangle, swim the desired distance along one side, then turn the bezel 90 degrees for the next side. Turn 90 degrees the same direction for 3 turns until you return to your start point. Do the same to navigate a triangle, but turn the bezel 120 degrees for 2 turns. You'll use squares and triangles most often for general navigation, but triangles come in handy navigating small areas. A few hints make compass navigation more effective. First, trust your compass, even if you feel like it's pointing the wrong way. Use natural navigation along with your compass and practice compass use on land periodically. Allow for the effects of currents or waves, and be prepared to navigate around obstacles you can't swim over. If you're navigating in mid-water, it's easiest if one buddy navigates and the other monitors depth. If you're navigating over a long distance, aim slightly to the right or left so if you miss your destination, you know the direction to search in. As mentioned, your navigation skills will come into play during your night adventure dive. Although it's dark, navigation at night differs little from during the day. You just have to use your dive light. Since you usually night dive at a familiar spot, you often want to relocate a particular site for a night dive. Night diving from a boat makes this easy because you usually anchor right on the site. In fact, many divers prefer night diving from a boat because it simplifies entries and exits, provides a comfortable way to get to and from the site, and because it's a good platform for gearing up before the dive and warming up after the dive. But if you're night diving from shore, you may have to swim to the dive site on the surface. Use your compass to follow the heading to the spot, and use your dive light to look at the bottom, surface objects that provide a bearing, and to watch for surface hazards such as boats or surf. Lights from buildings, stationary moored boats, or from other non-moving sources can help too. Look back for navigation clues to where you came before descending to guide you back to the exit. Look for distinct lights and their relation to each other and your exit point. Underwater, use natural navigation and compass navigation just as you would during the day, but don't try to go as far. It's much easier to explore a short distance from a known point, return, and then explore in a new direction. After the dive, exiting is usually just a matter of swimming back to shore, though you should use your light to watch for hazards on the surface, just like on the way out. You may find leaving some distinct, flashing lights ashore makes finding your exit point easier. Be sure, however, that your lights won't be confused with local navigation signals. If you have to swim back through a narrow area, such as a channel through a reef, it may help to leave 2 lights aligned with your exit. When returning, swim until they're aligned, and then swim shoreward. Now let's look at other techniques for night diving. Night diving is a great way to get a new look at a familiar dive site, to observe nocturnal aquatic life, and enjoy the brilliant colors of the underwater world. You'll practice these under your instructor's guidance during the night adventure dive. To reduce stress and to simplify navigation, it's best to plan night dives at a site you know well. When possible, arrive before dark so you can set up your equipment in the light and evaluate conditions. You'll want to avoid conditions like heavy surf, strong current, poor visibility, overhead environments, and heavy surge when night diving. It's recommended that you don't skip meals before night diving, so you'll have plenty of energy for the dive after being active all day. And you may find it more comfortable and reassuring to dive with a familiar buddy. Try to have someone who will remain ashore or on the boat to tend lights and lend a hand when getting in and out of the water. When you're ready to dive, go through your pre-dive safety check and make sure that your primary, and backup lights work. Next, use your light to make sure the entry area is clear. Enter the water with your light on so that if you accidentally lose it, you can find it easily. When you reach the dive site, as mentioned earlier, it's easiest if you descend along a reference line. Descend slowly and check your gauges frequently. Once on the bottom, stay close to your buddy as you explore. Maintain neutral buoyancy and avoid damaging any sensitive aquatic life. Make a habit of looking with your light before touching anything. Be careful not to shine your light in your buddy's eyes. Use your light to illuminate your own hand signals away from your buddy's eyes. How you wear your light affects how you see, and you need to be aware of buddy courtesy. Mounting lights on your mask, your hood, or a helmet frees your hands, for example, but it's harder to avoid shining them in your buddy's eyes when you look at him. You can also use your light to signal your buddy. This means okay. And waving your light back and forth means emergency, help, or attention. At the surface, this means okay. At the end of the dive, return to the reference line to make your ascent easier. Ascend the line no faster than 18 meters, 60 feet per minute, or as required by your computer. Make a safety stop and look up with your light as you near the surface so you don't bump into anything overhead. If you have to ascend away from the reference line, use your depth gauge or computer to track your ascent rate. During your safety stop, look and listen for boats before ascending to the surface. Deep diving techniques you practice under your instructor's supervision during the deep adventure dive. Apply what you've already learned to the deep water environment. In recreational dive training, a deep dive is considered any dive below 18 meters, 60 feet, but no deeper than 40 meters, 130 feet. Although 40 meters, 130 feet is the maximum, you'll probably find that an optimal depth limit of 30 meters, 100 feet provides more dive time, more light, and fewer problems from nitrogen narcosis or the risk of decompression sickness. So for the deep adventure dive, you and your instructor will plan the dive for 18 meters, 60 feet, to 30 meters, 100 feet. And you need to personalize your depth limit based on your experience, your buddy's experience, environmental conditions, any previous dives and the surface interval, and your distance from emergency help if it were needed. Any of these may call for an even shallower maximum depth. As you've already learned, it's easiest to make deep descents and ascents along a line or following a sloping bottom or wall. This helps you control your rate so you can equalize when descending and not exceed 18 meters, 60 feet per minute during ascents. But in good conditions, you may find it reasonable to descend and ascend without a reference. Keep your feet below your head to avoid vertigo, and face your buddy so you stay together. Use your depth gauge and timer or your dive computer's ascent rate indicator to keep ascents within a safe rate, and adjust your BCD frequently to keep your buoyancy under control. You can make a safety stop at 5 meters 15 feet by watching your gauges and monitoring your buoyancy. During the stop, look and listen for boats before surfacing. When you reach the bottom, stay close to your buddy, preferably within touching distance. In poor visibility, you may want to use a short buddy line to maintain contact, just as you might on a shallower dive in poor visibility. Adjust your BCD so you're neutrally buoyant when you reach the bottom. Avoid stirring up silt or kicking any sensitive aquatic life with your fins. If you need to make bottom contact, find a spot away from the reference line and free of sensitive aquatic life. As you begin to explore, relax and breathe slowly and deeply. It's harder for your regulator to deliver air as you go deeper, so swim slowly and avoid overexertion. This avoids overbreathing your regulator and demanding more than it can deliver. and it helps you conserve air. You use air faster on a deep dive, so check your air more often than you do on shallower dives. Plan your dive with ample reserve to return to the ascent point and make a safety stop. Use the air consumption calculation table in the Adventures in Diving manual or multimedia to help you plan your air use. You may make your deep dive along a wall, a sheer drop-off into very deep water. When diving along walls, watch your depth closely, since it's easy to descend without knowing it. You may find it easiest to stay about 3 meters, 10 feet above your planned maximum depth, giving you some room in case you accidentally descend a bit. Stay close to the wall. This provides a reference that helps you stay oriented. But remember that many walls teem with sensitive organisms, so be cautious not to bump into or damage them. It's wise to make a safety stop after any dive, but it's especially recommended when deep diving. In some cases, the recreational dive planner requires a safety stop. Make the safety stop ideally with your chest at the 5-meter, 15-foot point. And it's a good idea to review your dive plan to make sure you haven't accidentally exceeded your no decompression limit. If you have, you can simply extend the safety stop to cover the emergency decompression requirements. Note that planned stage decompression, such as in commercial and technical diving, is significantly more complex and has more potential hazard. Planned decompression is beyond the scope of this course. It's easiest to make the safety stop on a reference line, but as mentioned earlier, you can make a stop without one by closely watching your depth gauge and controlling your buoyancy. If you follow proper dive procedures and make safety stops, it's highly unlikely you will find yourself in a situation in which you've accidentally surfaced without making a required emergency decompression stop. If it were to happen, however, do not make any more dives. Alert your buddies and monitor yourself for signs of decompression illness. If any possible symptoms develop, breathe 100% oxygen and seek medical assistance immediately. Proper dive planning, following appropriate procedures, and staying within accepted limits make serious problems quite unlikely while diving. Nonetheless, it's worth noting a few potential problems and what to do if they occur. Some people find the first night and deep dives somewhat stressful, at least partly because they're new experiences. This isn't necessarily a problem, provided you manage stress appropriately. Your underwater navigation skills do a lot to reduce stress, because you'll feel more confident knowing where you are and which way to go if you want to return to the boat or shore. Much of what you learn during the adventure dives prevents stress by removing its sources. For example, in the night adventure dive, you learn that it's recommended that you night dive at familiar sites with familiar equipment. Doing so reduces stress because you're not dealing with a new site or equipment in the dark. And making adventure dives with an instructor you trust reduces stress because you know you have an experienced professional at hand to guide you, to help you avoid problems, and to teach you how to handle common problems if they do occur. If a problem occurs, don't react blindly or instinctively. Stop, breathe, think, and then act. Most problems have simple solutions if you're properly equipped, if you've properly planned the dive, and if you stay within the limits of your training and experience. For example, if your light fails while night diving, simply switch to your backup and end the dive. No big deal. Respond quickly and appropriately to a small problem, and it won't become a big one. Suppose your backup doesn't work. Borrow your buddy's backup light and end the dive. If you become separated from your buddy at night, look for the glow of his light. If you don't see it, cover your light and look. If you still don't see it, look for no more than 1 minute, then make a proper ascent and regroup on the surface. Or if conditions are such that ascending where you are isn't ideal, such as if there's a strong current, be sure to agree on another way to regroup when planning your dive. If you lose track of where you are, Consult your compass and natural references. If you're still disoriented, surface carefully and check your position. If you become disoriented during an ascent or descent, hang on to the reference line for a moment. That usually reestablishes your sense of direction. If you're away from the line, hold on to your buddy or even yourself and check your depth gauge. If you stay disoriented, it's usually best to ascend at a safe rate and end the dive. As you learned in your open water diver course, nitrogen narcosis is a potential problem during deep dives. Most divers begin to find narcosis noticeable between 24 meters 80 feet and 30 meters 100 feet. Narcosis isn't dangerous itself, but can cause a diver to react improperly or disregard safety procedures. Symptoms include inflexible thinking, poor judgment, a false sense of security, no concern for safety, euphoria, anxiety, or sleepiness. Look for inappropriate behavior, a short attention span, impaired attention to safety or stuporous behavior. Nitrogen narcosis is more likely if a diver overexerts underwater, if a diver doesn't have much deep diving experience, if a diver uses alcohol or other drugs that produce drowsiness before the dive, if a diver is anxious, or if a diver is fatigued. If you experience narcosis symptoms or see signs of it in your body, ascend to a shallower depth until symptoms subside, or end the dive. You can generally avoid significant narcosis symptoms by staying in shallower water, generally above 30 meters 100 feet. During your PADI open water diver course, you learned that holding your breath during ascent can lead to lung overexpansion injuries, and that exceeding dive table limits can cause decompression sickness. Together, both of these conditions are referred to as decompression illness. By breathing continuously and never holding your breath. By staying well within no decompression limits. By ascending no faster than 18 meters 60 feet per minute. And by always making a safety stop, the chances of experiencing decompression illness are remote. Nonetheless, since there's always some chance of decompression illness, even when you do everything correctly, it's wise to be familiar with decompression illness symptoms and first aid. And it's possible for a diver to make an error leading to decompression illness, which is in fact the most common reason recreational divers experience it. To minimize the probability of decompression illness, use the recreational dive planner accurately and stay well within its limits, or well within the limits of any other table or computer you use. And remember to ascend slowly, 18 meters 60 feet per minute or slower, or even slower if required by your computer. Keep a close watch on your air supply. Divers have experienced decompression illness after running out of air and ascending while holding their breath. As a certified diver, you're aware that you should never hold your breath scuba diving, but making sure you don't run out of air lessens the chance of disregarding your training in an emergency. There are 10 factors thought to predispose you to decompression illness. The more that apply to you, the more conservatively you should dive. Age is a factor, because as you get older, your circulatory system becomes less efficient, affecting nitrogen elimination. Fat is thought to hold more nitrogen than other tissues, so individuals with high fat-to-body weight ratios may retain more nitrogen. Heavy exertion increases your heart rate and circulation, affecting nitrogen absorption and release. And injuries or illness may also alter how your body handles excess nitrogen. Dehydration reduces the quantity of blood available to carry away dissolved nitrogen. And alcohol contributes to dehydration and also affects blood flow. Diving in cold water may cause restricted circulation, and a hot shower or bath immediately after a dive may also alter normal blood flow. Improper breathing, such as holding your breath, may affect nitrogen release and raise the risk of lung overexpansion injuries. Finally, flying after diving or diving at altitude affect dive table calculations, which are based on surfacing at sea level. Always follow current recommendations for flying after diving, and follow altitude diving procedures when diving 300 meters, 1,000 feet above sea level. And clearly, staying fit and in good health reduces the chances of decompression sickness. Because bubbles can form or end up in different parts of the body, the symptoms and signs of decompression illness can vary. They include unusual fatigue or weakness, skin itch, pain in the arms or legs, either the joints or mid-limb, or in the torso, dizziness and vertigo, local numbness, tingling, paralysis, and shortness of breath are also symptoms. You may see signs in another diver, such as a blotchy skin rash, the tendency to favor one leg or arm, staggering, or coughing spasms. More serious signs include collapse and unconsciousness. There are two important steps for handling suspected decompression illness, whether the cause is lung overexpansion injury or decompression sickness. First, give the affected diver 100% emergency oxygen, which helps eliminate excess nitrogen from the body. Second, get the patient to an emergency medical facility. The diver will usually need to be treated in a recompression chamber, so it's important to get the diver into proper emergency medical care. Although decompression illness is usually treated by putting the diver back under pressure, do not attempt to recompress a diver by putting him back under water. Recompression takes several hours and may include drug therapy, all of which aren't likely to be feasible on a dive boat at a dive site. And improper, incomplete recompression is worse than no recompression. Now it's your turn for adventure, to face new challenges and to learn new skills in the underwater navigation, night and deep, or whatever adventure dives you choose. Certification in the Adventures in Diving program as an adventure diver or advanced open water diver recognizes your accomplishments and denotes that you've taken your diving abilities to the next level. It's something you can be proud of. But it's more than recognition. These certifications open new diving opportunities to you, such as dive trips exclusively for divers who've reached your training level. When you complete the Advanced Open Water Diver certification, your certification opens other opportunities by qualifying you to complete the PADI Rescue Diver course. An important step in your development as a diver, the Rescue Diver course refines and expands your ability to prevent dive accidents and develops your accident management and diving first aid skills. The subject is serious, but you'll find the Rescue Diver class challenging, rewarding, and a lot of fun. So enjoy the new adventures, challenges, and excitement of the PADI Adventures in Diving program and through the opportunities that lie beyond. You'll learn a lot and have a blast doing it. And who knows, you may even find you want to join the ranks of PADI professionals and share your adventures with others. Bon voyage!